Thank you for joining us today. Sakta is absolutely thrilled to have you as an interviewee, and I know it's different for you to swap.
It's so weird to be sitting on this side, but I'll behave myself.
I know, I feel like I'm in the hot seat and I'm like, but we know that you're a very fearless, passionate journalist. When we hear Devi's show is on, we're like, no, she's going to go in for the kill. And in all that you do, you exude this passion in what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it's so important. And we would love to know, how did you find your passion and begin to pursue it as a career for you?
So when I was at school, I was very good at public speaking, and it was just something that naturally came. So I think a good idea to figure out what you're passionate about is ask yourself, what are you really good at doing, where it feels absolutely effortless. So when I was in standard 8, and that was a very, very, very long time ago, and that was, I'll give you the year so you don't have to work it out, 1988, I was 15 years old. Don't do the maths, I'm 48. And two big things happened to me. The first big thing was I watched the first episode of Carte Blanche. Now, at that time, nobody knew what this thing called investigative journalism even was. Let's put it into context. The country was burning. It was the 80s. A state of emergency had already been implemented in the country. And I saw Derek and Ruda, and they were doing this show, and they were going places. And as the credit rolls at the end of the program, I turned to my parents and I said, I am going to work for the show one day. And my dad is still alive, so he tells everybody the story because it's true. I need to actually film him saying it, so that at this point I'll just whip my phone out and say, here we go. And I think it was because I had connected with this thing called investigative journalism. But I remember hearing my dad saying to my mom in the kitchen, this girl is going to bring us nothing but trouble. Because he was right, if you think about it. Because the idea of working as a journalist during the 1980s was probably the most ridiculous thought anybody could have, because journalists were found headless in ditches all the time. And the National Party government was certainly not amenable to anybody doing investigatives on them. The second big thing that happened to me was that I won a massive speech contest. It was called the Natal Best Speaker, and it was a very prestigious contest. I was always good at speaking off the cuff, and if anybody gave me a topic. But what those two things did for me was reminded me of where I needed to be. So I was one of those lucky kids that, one, had parents who were very supportive. There wasn't an expectation that I was going to do medicine, as an example, not at all. And my parents always said, find yourself a job that you love, because you're going to spend a very long time doing it. And I subsequently realized what they meant. And what they meant was, I mean, even now, do you know, I can tell you, after 27 years in the industry, I do not believe I've worked a single day. I do not for 1 minute. I get up in the morning with a spring in my step. I want to be where I am, and I want to be doing what I do. So this for me is not work. Getting a salary check at the end of the month is just the bonus, really. The fact that I get paid to do what I love. I've always been very driven. So it's one idea to say, I want to do this. I want to work for Carte Blanche. I want to be an investigative journalist, and then you do nothing about it. There has to be a plan. So my whole life, whatever dream I wanted to achieve, I would take out a piece of paper and I would write down, how am I going to get there? With no roadmap, you're driving around aimlessly. So towards the end of my BA degree, I decided, well, I got invited to do an honors degree in drama and performance studies, and now my parents were like, well, we don't know about this. At one point, my dad called it an acting license, I remember, and there were only like 7 kids that were even chosen to do it. And it was a really big deal to get invited for an honors degree. And then he said to me, okay, you want to do it, I'll pay for it, but go out and find yourself a job in the industry now as a third-year university student. I thought, yeah, very good point. There needs to be some kind of focus here. I sent my CV everywhere. I sent it to East Coast Radio, which was Radio Port Natal at the time. I sent it to KTV, which was a kids channel on Mnet, because someone said I was short enough and I could make it. And I sent my CV off, to Lotus FM. Now, I had grown up in a house where I don't speak an Indian language. I went to the Lotus FM were the only people that gave me a call back. I went to the audition and I failed the audition. And the next thing I know, I get this. He says to me, "But we think you can read news." And I thought to myself, that's all I needed. So before I was 20, I landed myself a job at the SABC. I started off reading the news, and then I thought I'm going to fix my pronunciations because I need to do other things here. So I learnt and practiced, and then I started presenting music shows there. I had no idea what I was saying because I don't understand what I was saying, but that didn't matter. My idea was I wanted to do a talk show, and talk show host didn't pitch up about 3 or 4 years later. The next thing I know, I'm there. The station manager says to me, "Well, best you do it and don't mess it up." And typically me, this is 1996, so post 94, I decided to talk about where do South Africans of Indian descent believe they fit in the new South Africa, which was, even if you have that topic now, people would go crazy. But I did the show, and to a large extent, I sensed that I was right with the topic, that people were not ready for this new South Africa. The station manager called me the next day, and I thought I was going to get fired from the SABC, and then now my parents would be really disappointed. And he said to me, "Whatever you did last night, I want you to do tomorrow night and for every other night." And he offered me a full-time job. And my job was to produce and present the talk show for Lotus and to run their current affairs program, which was my dream come true. And I think I would have been about 23 by that time, which was really, really young to get this kind of opportunity. But for me, I was now living that dream. So I made sure I finished the higher diploma in education, because that's another thing. Having passions and dreams, great, but you need safety nets because you never know when you're going to need them. Finished the higher diploma in education and living my life. 2 years later, I get a call from Nelson Mandela's people, the most ridiculous story ever, but it's truth, Bob. So I ended up meeting Madiba in 1998. He had heard about the show. And I sat across from Nelson Mandela. There were other people there, right? So it wasn't like a one-on-one invite. And he started talking about his concern around the fact that he believed that Indian people feel that they don't belong in the new South Africa, which was exactly what I spoke about in my first topic. But no one had told me how to behave when you're in the presence of a president. So while Madiba was talking, I put my hand up and I said, "Excuse me, Madiba, I know exactly what you're talking about because," and then everyone was like, "Shh." And I said, "But why? I have something that I need to say." And Spoon Debele, who was with him at the time, leaned across the table and looked so angry. And he said, "You don't interrupt the president when he's talking." So I said, no, but the thing is, explained. And we started having a conversation and I said, "Madiba, I know the solution. I've got it. I need you to come onto my show for an hour." And he said, "Yes." I said, "But I have one condition. And the condition is that I don't send you the questions beforehand." Just like that. And that's what happened. 3 months later, he was on the show and he didn't get the questions beforehand. And he sat there for an hour and he took calls from our listeners and he answered questions that I had. And that was another reminder to me that I was on the right path, that I was doing this thing as this young upstart, but it was working. Straight after that, the Sunday Times offered me a column in the Sunday Times. I said, "Absolutely." And I put the phone down and I thought, "Oh my God, how are you going to do this?" But I'm one of those chicks who truly believes I will learn how to do something. That column ran for 16 solid years. A year later, in the year, I think it was the year 1999, very long time ago, I then applied for a position there and I became their features editor in Durban. So that multitasking thing is something we also need to think about. Don't just do that one job and when the other opportunities come, tell yourself, "Oh, I can't do it." Yes, you can. You can do it because you must do it. There's no two ways about it. Upskilling is important because at the same time, remember, I'm still thinking carte blanche. And I thought to myself, there's one skill that I'm missing is I don't understand finance. And I pictured myself always doing these carte blanche interviews, even though I didn't have the job. But I thought I want to be able to look at a company's financial statements and see for myself where the money went. So I thought, well, there's only one solution to that. I'm going to do an MBA. So my husband and I, we just got married. The year I started my MBA, which is the year we got married, is the year I fell pregnant with my first child. And it was the year I decided there were even bigger and better things that were going to come, and I just needed to buckle down. It was the most difficult thing I had ever done in my entire life. I don't have a finance brain. I had to squeeze this brain, and it became like plasticine to force it to stretch, to think in different ways. At the same time, I sent off my show reel to Carte Blanche, and I said, let me know. 6 months later, they called me. I went up for the interview. I got the job, which was great, but my first year was a disaster. First year I did 3 stories in the entire year. That's not feasible. And I went into the second year telling myself that I had to be Devi who's on radio. I had to be that same Devi on TV. I went into that second year realizing that I needed to be myself and I needed to bring my stories to the table. So the first story I did was the driver's license fraud in Durban at Rosborough testing station. And I remember getting mic'd up just before that confront and telling myself, this is your last chance, because you cannot spend another year at Carte Blanche and you do another 3 stories. And I remember leaping out of the car when we got to the center, and I saw the crook and I just ran. I just ran towards him and I became like a person possessed. So a lot of what you see now on television is what I did on that day, and I just let my instinct follow me. I've never been good with prepared questions. And then that was that. I never looked back. I spent 18 amazing years at Carte Blanche. So I saw just about every nook and cranny of South Africa and learned so much about our own people. But then what happens after 18 years? What happens when you achieve your dream and you're 29 years old? I started to feel a little bit itchy and edgy. I needed to move, and I knew that. And in 2019, I just got a call to say, hey, how would you like to have your own show? I said, yeah, I'd like to have my own show, but I think you're crazy. So we're going to have to talk about this first. I'm not so sure. And I think part and parcel of running your own career and running your dreams and your life on your own is accepting that you need to be agile. This was in May of 2020. We had no idea what was even going to come. We kicked off the show on a wing and a prayer. Today we can say we've got millions on the show after just 6 months on air, which is fantastic. No looking back. But again now, I keep thinking, what's next? What's next for my career? So when you think about career choices and what you want to do, I think it's important, like I said, you can't have the blinkers, you got to think that wide. Doing the one job isn't good enough because a lot of people lost work. So a lot of side hustles developed in the beginning, which are now main hustles. And that's the only way, I think, to look at it. Raising children was a big thing for me as well, and teaching them to understand that nothing is impossible. Spread your mind. Try it all. I remember at one point my daughter said to me she'd like to play the drums. And I thought, well, we'll do that, but I'm not buying the drums. I don't want the drums in my house, but we'll do it. She did music till matric and played rock drums. She still plays rock drums. But here's an example of an unusual skill that you may think as a parent, because parents may think, oh, I don't want you to become a rock star. You give your kids whatever opportunities you can afford, because some of them are also really expensive and it may not be available, but bend their minds. Send them to go and work in somebody's shop for a while. Give them experiences, because that's the only way that they can learn. And just don't put them off. Young children have ideas, and then we say to them, oh, you'll never earn money doing that. Sometimes it's true, and you got to think about those things too, but rather give them an opportunity. If your child says that she wants to be a psychologist, things will have to change in terms of lockdown levels, but then organize 2 days where she job shadows with a psychologist, and she may come back realizing that's not for her. But that's a lot better than registering for a degree and 4 or 5 years later realizing it's not for you. That's just a waste. And play to skills that you already have. If you identify them earlier, fantastic. If you still don't know what those skills are yet, gain the experiences to find the skills, because sometimes it's not really apparent.
Thank you so much for taking your time out of your day to tell SACTA about you, how you've taken your passion and turned it into your purpose and your career. I think we definitely need raw, unfiltered perspectives if we're going to change career development in our country. And that is what we need to start to do. We need our youth to change their mindset so that they can start living their dreams, fulfilling their passions, and living their career.
No, thanks for having me. The biggest takeout for me is for young people to understand nothing about what I've done was easy. Nothing. And easy doesn't make things happen. You're going to have to put in the effort, put in the time, put in the graft, and it does work.